Alright, Ken Wheeler response video. Yeah, it's not going to be physics. Yeah, I really don't want to do philosophy kind of arguments here, but, he throws it into his video, so there's not much of a response. I mean, I could do it on the other channel, but, it's too unrelated in a way. But whatever, it doesn't matter. Just really an annoying. I mean, his physics is annoying enough in that it's just no details, just a lot of big words. And but this was lots of things to critique.
I have a really neat and true story. I have the link to this picture below, and I also have a link to the video of Charles Brody's assignments. He's this extreme.
Right, so a video made in like the 50s, one of those kind of propaganda films, biography kind of things. Really nice, okay. I don't even know if all the details are correct, though, because the guy was called Proteus, and I've read that he called himself Proteus. And the documentary says it was something his high school teacher or something gave him, something like that. So it's always those, I mean, stuff you're saying, why can't they get these stories right? But it would have been nice if everybody else's life was as exposed as people now. Just because now everybody has videos of everything they do, and everything's kind of chronicalized, and you really can't just remake history because it's sort of written, as it happens, in a lot more detail. But anyway.
Really deformed dwarf.
All right, really deformed dwarf. So he doesn't even have any. He just has no. There's no. I'll slow this down. Just it's probably a little too fast. He doesn't have any inhibition about saying it with any kind of delicacy. Just a little bit of courtesy or kindness or whatever. Deformed. It's unnecessary verbiage.
Center of these people. By the way, he's also the guy.
Right. Well, when the picture was taken, he was actually the head of the division at General Electric, so he should sort of be in the front because he's sort of the boss when the picture was taken. And I guess the picture was taken because Einstein came to visit, and so they wanted to get a picture with Einstein. So everybody wanted a picture with Einstein, so they decided, hey, let's just get everybody in the picture.
They said it wasn't possible. That developed a power station, I think it was 28 mile long, electrical lines that tapped off the energy from Niagara Falls to Schenectady, New York, I believe. They said it wasn't possible. And
all right. so I mean, they said it wasn't possible. Like this is I don't know, some kind of incredible feat. But you can always say like going to the moon. People might have said, well, it was impossible. But clearly, once we've done it, it's sort of, oh yeah, it's kind of obvious. It's quite possible. I'm not trying to diminish Steinmetz at all, but Steinmetz was like a good engineer, but he wasn't like he didn't do the thing that saved mankind hundreds of years kind of technology. He did the kind of technology that saved people 5 years, stuff that we were heading right for it. We were heading right for it, and Steinmetz was the first guy who came up with it. But it wasn't like we weren't already heading right for it.
Him and his little dwarf with a gigantic cigar.
All right, little dwarf with a gigantic cigar. Again, he has to keep just kind of piling it on. Like, oh, it's all you can see. All you see is the dwarf. All you see are these superficial things. And this is coming from a guy who's, superficially a mess. And so he wants everybody just to think of him as the guy with, holes in his ears and too many tattoos and fat and bald. He doesn't want you to think of him as a person, as a human being of some kind.
Said that it was possible. Really, a really brilliant person. By the way, you can actually see, if you click on the link below for this image, behind him to the right is the idiot Albert Einstein, and immediately behind him is Nikola Tesla.
Right, so, again, just throw in this stuff like somehow Einstein's the idiot, and I think Einstein was wrong, but Einstein clearly wasn't an idiot. It's just an insane title to give Einstein. Coming up with a wrong answer that fits is almost as difficult as coming up with the right answer that fits.
By the way, Nikola Tesla, I think Charles Brody's Steinmetz had over 202 inventions in his life.
Right. So what? I'm sorry. I mean, the inventions are the metal cap for a pen. You know what I mean? A ton of the inventions are things that'll never be used by anybody ever again. And it was the age of invention. be serious here, okay? The Industrial Revolution, everybody who was anybody was inventing all over the place because there was lots of shit to invent.
Well, Tesla invented the AC generator. It actually took Steinmetz, the really...
So again, he didn't invent the AC generator. That's just nonsense. He invented the phase, using phase in alternating current. So the phased motor, you could say, he invented. But he definitely didn't invent the AC generator. That's just nonsense. I mean, you can't invent any other kind of generator technically. There really isn't any other kind than an AC generator.
Crooked, horribly deformed, and I'm actually saying
crooked, horribly deformed. I mean, this is what this is how he treats his heroes. You just can't get over it, so he's just going to keep pointing it out. Don't see anything else. Don't see anything else. Just see horribly deformed, crooked, bent, deformed. I mean, it's just so insane. And it gets no, I haven't even gotten to. This is just the funny part. The seriously demented part is coming soon.
In a positive way here in a second. I'm not actually making fun of the guy. I have a lot of respect for him since I read his books.
So it shows respect by just pointing out how you're a dwarf and you're deformed. That's respect showing. It's not in my book of the respect showing. That's not one of the first signs of respect showing, is pointing out you're fat and bald. You have 4 eyes. You have ugly tattoos. There, I showed you some respect.
Steinmetz, to perfect the AC generator by Nikola Tesla. I'm about to tell you.
So, again, Steinmetz's contributions were valid contributions, accelerated, whatever. You know, they were good. He was a good engineer. That's why he was the head of the division at General Electric, because he was good. All right, but it's not the same thing as like Da Vinci or something.
The whole story of
well, Michelangelo is a better example.
Tesla did to Ford is really hilarious. By the way, this is also
he gouged him, attempted to, and Ford said, "No, thank you. We're pretty expensive for a guy who dresses really well."
He was born. They thought about ending his life immediately or getting rid of him. This is another reason why I can't stay.
So again, he doesn't get. You didn't even bother watching the documentary he's linking to, because clearly, if he would have watched it, he would have understood that there's a bigger context, a lot bigger. So let's understand. So Steinmetz was a 3rd generation, okay, not only a dwarf, but having the spinal defect as well. And so his grandfather gave it to his father, and then his father gave it to him, kind of thing. And Steinmetz deliberately didn't get married to prevent giving it to his son, so to speak. And statistically, it's only a 1 in 4 chance, I think. It might be even less, depending on who you marry, of course. But that's 1 in 4 isn't that high odds, and yet he wasn't willing to take the chance of being the 4th asshole to do it, or the 3rd asshole to do it to his own son. And this asshole is going to talk like that's an irrational decision.
And anybody that talks about, oh my God, this baby's so deformed. Yeah, I'm sorry if you hate me for saying this, but I can't stand people that talk about like euthanizing, small little children, or
small little children. No one. Who talks about euthanizing small little children? Where does that conversation even take place, right? So that doesn't even take place. What happens is people have abortions. Okay, they discontinue a pregnancy, so they don't let the zygote grow any bigger and turn into a delivered baby. And he's calling that as some sort of horrendous, irrational decision, rather than a perfectly rational decision. And it's one that somehow is done for some malicious reason, that somehow people are doing it to spare themselves rather than to spare the victim. And so all these assumptions and presumptions. Now this is supposed to be coming from some guy who gained some sort of knowledge in life because he was married to an older woman, much older, and he had to take care of her while she died. And he talked about how horrible that was and how awful it was to hear her screaming in the night and all of that stuff. And yet he's showing such a lack of empathy. You're saying that whole story has to be a big pile of crap. I mean, he's just a compulsive liar, okay? Because that couldn't have happened to him. He couldn't have had that real life experience of watching somebody live years they should never have lived in a condition that nobody should endure. And yet he'll sit there and say this crap. He's a fucking liar.
Oh my God, he's so deformed. This guy basically gave the entire world our modern electric.
Right. And so he thinks everybody looks at him and just sees a deformed guy. So again, just because he sees it the world that way, because he can't see value in people, besides himself, he's got this huge fucking ego. Then he thinks everybody else looks at everybody else and just sees the superficial shit. That's all they can see, because that's all he sees.
System. And if like today.
So again, he's building it up like somehow mankind would be hundreds of years behind if it wasn't for Steinmetz. And that's just nonsense. They wouldn't even have been decades behind, because the world was changing so rapidly. And so his inventions are good, his innovations are good, but they weren't the kind of thing like nobody was going to figure that one out. None of his inventions are something that we wouldn't have figured out. They're not miraculous. I don't know how to say it. They just weren't. They just weren't the kind of Benjamin Franklin revolutionized the world kind of inventions.
I'm sorry if you don't like this video.
No, I don't like you. I think you're just such a cunt for making this dirty, stinking, lousy, steaming piece of shit of a video where you're basically saying, well, because some crippled people can produce great innovations, we should impose crippleality on as many as possible. We shouldn't give a damn about how much it tortures them. If they were good to eat, would you eat them because you keep having them just because they're tasty? I mean, if being a dwarf was tasty, would you make dwarves just so you could enjoy them for dessert?
Part of the video, tough luck, I don't really give a damn.
Yes, well, I don't either. Tough luck, you're a shithead. A fucking piece of shithead. You're not even a shithead, you're shit on a shithead.
This is, if they scanned like the mother's womb today and saw Charles Proteus.
So, Charles Proteus Steinmetz, who he has respect for as an intellectual, drew the conclusion that, no, you don't want to make that baby. You wouldn't want to have that baby. He wouldn't have had that baby. And yet, this asshole thinks he was wrong. He was an asshole to think that way. Steinmetz was a fool and a fucktard for doing the right thing and saying, I'm not going to get married, I'm not even going to take a chance, I'm not going near that bullshit. This asshole is sitting there saying basically he was an asshole to draw that conclusion based on his own fucking experience as having to endure the surgeries and the other crap that goes with being born in that condition.
Steinmetz. They're like, oh god, he's horribly deformed, he's a dwarf, we're just maybe, yeah. You know where I'm going with this, right?
Yeah, I think you're insane. That's where you're going with this. You've already demonstrated that your fucking physics is based on some religion crap, and clearly this is some kind of connection to your religion crap somewhere, right? You have some sort of you somehow don't believe in evolution. You somehow think that the chimpanzees we inject cancer into in laboratories somewhere are less human than fetuses, because you think fetuses are fully maturated, complete human beings, and they're being murdered by evil people who don't want to impose decades of suffering on them. Fuck you. You're a miserable piece of shit.
See, this is one of the most brilliant minds of the past 150 years.
Okay, again, just a preposterous exaggeration, but even if he was, and even if he knew he was, clearly his judgment was, you don't give a kid this condition. You just don't go there. Bad move.
Yeah, can you imagine if they had ultrasound womb scanning equipment back then? What would have...
Right, we shouldn't. Nobody should have prevented horrible deformities in the past, and we shouldn't be preventing them now where we can. All right, we should just impose the misery, impose the short, miserable life. I mean, I actually took care of a person in that condition, lived 18 years, and spent his whole life miserable, completely miserable. And you want to impose that torture for no good fucking reason except what? You like flowers or something. Some fairy notions in your head that you're being sensitive. And this is in the context of where you said you just went through this horrible experience watching somebody die for 10 years. Or 5, or whatever the number is. Somebody obviously with a lot of money they gave to you. Yeah. You're just such a miserable piece of shit.
Happened with her, That's why I actually have a serious issue with people that just think...
Yeah, I have a serious issue with assholes who pretend that they've acquired some enlightenment through personal experience when it's all just a story, just a big pile of fucking shit.
Oh, that person's deformed. Let's just kill it. Really?
Yeah, really. That's right. But again, nobody's saying that. But everybody's just saying this. If you can prevent deformities, that's the rational thing to do. There's 7 billion people on this planet. We don't have a shortage of human beings. So yeah, we can be a little bit rational about imposing just completely unnecessary suffering for absolutely no good reason, except you have some fairy notion that the zygote has some sort of will to live that's being violated.
Absolute genius. This is the guy that Nikola Tesla looked up to. Anyway, this is about Henry Ford and one of the...
So again, there really isn't... Steinmetz is an interesting character, but really nothing dazzling. Nothing.
His electrical generators. Charles Porty Steinmetz. Little guy with gigantic cigar. His spine is so curved if you look at images of him, and also check out the video. It looks like his entire body is part of him.
Yeah, well, that's not the way he was born, asshole. See, so that happens over the years. So he starts off not nearly as bad, and it just gets worse and worse and worse. More and more debilitating as he gets older. But you don't give a fuck.
Magic trick. His entire upper body is like over here, and his lower body is over here. It's like... His upper body is... There should be feet below him, but no, his feet are... That's how deformed his spine is. Yeah. He can barely walk. Absolute brilliant genius. Anyway, Henry Ford, whose electrical engineers couldn't solve a problem they were having with a gigantic electrical generator, called on Steinmetz. By the way, General Electric built a 2-story house and experimenting lab for Steinmetz. He was basically the guy that put General Electric on the map. You think it was someone else? No, it was this little...
Well, there you see, the story again is being kind of perverted. General Electric built him a laboratory on his house. They didn't build his house.
The deformed dwarf right here. Henry Ford had a gigantic electrical generator. They called Steinmetz in because it was they couldn't get it to work right. And upon arriving, Steinmetz rejected all assistance and only asked for a blank notebook, a pencil, and a cot to sleep on. According to Scott, who observed Steinmetz, he listened to the generator with his ear and got up on a ladder because the generator was enormous and scribbled a bunch of computations on a notepad. By the way, this guy's an expert in math. Some of his equations are infinitely, oh my god, I mean, page after page after page, just one equation, page after page after page. He scribbled computations on a notepad.
Yeah, right. Unsolvable equations that really nobody's using because they're unsolvable. So yes, that's not exactly an example of brilliance. That's an example of a little bit, But anyway, again, so this just has to do with windings, and they had the wrong number of windings, blah, blah, blah.
For 2 straight days and nights, observing Ford's malfunctioning generator. Nobody could figure out, working for Henry Ford with the best minds, pretty much, figure out how his generator wasn't working right. On the second night, little Steinmetz asked for a ladder. He climbed up on the generator and made a chalk mark on the side of the enormous generator. Then he told Henry Ford's skeptical electrical engineering geniuses to remove a plate at the mark that he made with chalk. They replaced 16 copper windings from the field coil. They did that, and afterwards the generator performed to perfection. Henry Ford was thrilled until he got an invoice from General Electric for who Steinmetz was working. And the amount of, by the way, back in the day, this is an enormous amount of money, $10,000. Today that would be like a $150,000 bill. While Ford acknowledged that Steinmetz, successfully diagnosed and fixed it, that he balked at the figure. He asked for an itemized bill for what the little crooked midget, I know that's the wrong word, little person, dwarf, did that was worth 10.
All right. So now he's put those words in Ford's mouth. So he calls him a midget. He just keeps doing it, like he's doing somebody. He's like he's paying somebody some kind of respect by just saying it over and over. Like anybody talking about Ken in the future, right, when he's dead, just keep pointing out how he's a preposterously fat, bald guy with too many tattoos. And just keep pointing it out and pointing it out.
$1,000 is an enormous amount of money back then. Steinmetz responded personally to Henry Ford's request with the following itemized bill. Making a chalk mark, $1. Knowing where to place the mark, $9,999. This is a true story. Isn't that cool? $1 for the chalk mark. That was the labor, the physical labor. But his mental labor and his magnificent genius was $9,999. Ford Henry Ford paid the bill immediately.
Yes, right. But he probably never hired him again, right? Because, the guy's way too expensive.
Yeah, you got an itemized receipt. So there you go, folks. Here's the super genius. He's got 13 different books, a lot of articles, 2 doctorate degrees, I believe. Some of his equations are so enormous and so complex that some of them have not even been solved today. That is an established fact. The little dwarf with the...
Yes. The little dwarf, he does it again. He just keeps doing it. Just keeps doing it.
Extremely crooked spine. I'm not making fun of him because I actually really appreciate everything.
Yes, you would like to impose more of it on more people. Let's make more babies with crooked spines because they're all come out to be geniuses. That's right, the way it works. I mean, if I guess there was some evidence like that, like it actually did create geniuses, he'd think it would be worth it then. I mean, he thinks it's worth it when it's not a fact. If it was a fact, he would do it. He would impose those kinds of liabilities on somebody on purpose just so he can gain something by having another fucking deluded kook like himself in the world.
His writings are amazing. The gigantic cigar. You see the people behind him? The inferior people behind
I mean, there's nothing you can say, right?
behind him, including Einstein, who is inferior by any estimation, and Nikola Tesla standing behind him. He's not in front because he's the shortest, which of course he is. He's in front because he's the genius amongst all these people in the background. You see, everybody's heard of Einstein and Tesla, but no one's ever heard of the crooked-spined little dwarf up here with a gigantic cigar. That was...
So he just keeps calling him the same thing over and over again. He won't call him by his name. He'll just keep doing that.
The genius that perfected many of Nikola Tesla's inventions, specifically the AC motor, and he's the one that developed the law of hysteresis and many other things that actually made the invention, the AC generator invention, actually work correctly.
Right. I'm just saying this is all stuff that, it was brand new. Of course they were going to figure out how to do it, blah, 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 blah. I'm not taking anything away from it. It's just the kind of thing that he didn't invent the printing press. He invented, the typesetting machine or something.
Well, I invented it, but Steinmetz actually perfected it that would work reliably. Instead of farting and belching, and which early AC motors before Steinmetz perfected them, they worked, but not really. It took Steinmetz to perfect the design. The devil's in the details. The little dwarf figured out all the details of Tesla's invention. And there you go. There's a neat little...
Whatever. That's just a silly rendition of history, but whatever. Fine.
Story. Totally true, by the way.
No.
Thank you so much for watching. Click the image below, and also the video, which is an old video, black and white video, on the life of Steinmetz. Yeah. What a brilliant little dude. And he's...
I really appreciate... I think he really appreciates being called little dude. I'm sure he appreciates that. Thanks.
So, and very prolific writer and author. What a brilliant guy.
Well, why don't you do a video and have a bunch of his paragraphs quoted, and if it's all that brilliant. I mean, I'm not saying it was good for its time, but it really wasn't changed the world kind of stuff.
People like that don't exist anymore. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.
Yeah. Instead, we have turds like you. Unfortunately, isn't that just so depressing? Preposterously fat. He really is getting fatter and fatter. Anyway, but what an obnoxious video. I just found that just disgusting. Let's just ignore the fact that Steinmetz himself wouldn't impose the disease on a kid, and this fucking turd is going to sit there and insult not only his judgment, but the motive behind his judgment. He thinks Steinmetz didn't like his kids and was killing them because they were too big a pain in the ass. Yeah, no. He knew it was a terrible thing to impose on a child, and he didn't wish to impose it. And this fat piece of crap is trying to turn that into some sort of bigotry. Because he's a stupid cunt who lies about it, everything about his life. Yeah, it's a lie. So anyway, enough of this turd. Disgusting. Anyway, till next time. Such.